Every second, something inside you is almost going wrong. Your temperature drifts upward by a fraction of a degree. The sugar in your blood drops slightly. Carbon dioxide quietly accumulates in your bloodstream. Any one of these changes, left uncorrected, would slowly pull your body away from life. Yet you feel none of it, because before awareness arrives, correction has already happened. Welcome to Mattermosaic, piecing together the universe, one discovery at a time. Today, we are exploring how the human body maintains balance every second, not through stillness, but through constant, invisible adjustment that has been refined over centuries of scientific discovery. The idea that life depends on internal balance did not emerge from modern technology, but from careful observation in 19th century Europe. In the 1850s, in Paris, French physiologist Claude Bernard was studying how animals survived despite dramatic changes in their surroundings. He noticed that while external conditions fluctuated, the fluid environment inside the body remained remarkably stable. He called this protected internal state the milieu intérieur. Bernard argued that without this internal stability, complex life would be impossible. At the time, this idea challenged prevailing views that focused mainly on anatomy rather than regulation. Several decades later, in the early 20th century, American physiologist Walter Bradford Cannon at Harvard Medical School expanded Bernard's insight. In 1926, Cannon introduced the term homeostasis to describe the dynamic processes that preserve internal stability. Drawing on experiments involving temperature control, blood sugar regulation, and stress responses, Cannon demonstrated that the body maintains balance through coordinated feedback systems. His work transformed physiology from a descriptive science into one focused on regulation and control. What Bernard and Cannon revealed was not a static body, but a system perpetually on the edge of instability. Human enzymes operate optimally at around 37 degrees Celsius. Blood pH must remain close to 7.4. Sodium and potassium concentrations across cell membranes must be tightly regulated to allow electrical signaling. These values are not approximate. Even small deviations can disrupt protein structure, nerve transmission, and energy production. Life persists because deviation is detected early and corrected quickly. This detection begins with sensors distributed throughout the body. Thermoreceptors in the skin and deep within the brain monitor temperature. Chemoreceptors located in the carotid arteries and brainstem measure oxygen, carbon dioxide, and acidity. Stretch receptors in blood vessel walls sense pressure changes with every heartbeat. These sensors constantly send information to control centers, primarily in the hypothalamus, a small region located at the base of the brain that connects the nervous and endocrine systems. The hypothalamus acts as an integration hub. It compares incoming signals against physiological set points and initiates corrective responses when deviation occurs. These responses are carried out by effectors, including muscles, glands, and blood vessels. The defining feature of most homeostatic systems is negative feedback, meaning the response counteracts the initial change. When temperature rises, cooling mechanisms activate. When glucose falls, energy stores are mobilized. Balance is preserved through opposition, not amplification. Temperature regulation offers one of the clearest examples of this process. In humans, core body temperature must remain within a narrow range to preserve enzyme function. When body temperature increases, thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect the shift within seconds. In response, blood vessels near the skin dilate, increasing heat loss to the environment. Sweat glands, controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, release fluid that cools the body through evaporation. These mechanisms were documented experimentally in the late 19th and early 20th centuries through controlled exposure studies conducted in European physiology laboratories. When temperature drops, the response reverses. Blood vessels constrict to conserve heat, and skeletal muscles begin involuntary contractions known as shivering. This process generates heat through increased metabolic activity. Failure of these mechanisms leads to hypothermia, a condition first systematically studied during polar expeditions in the late 19th century, where explorers documented the progressive loss of coordination and consciousness as body temperature fell. Energy balance presents a slower but equally critical challenge. The human brain, which consumes roughly 20% of the body's glucose despite accounting for only 2% of body mass, depends on a continuous fuel supply. This dependence became clear in the early 20th century through studies of insulin deficiency. In 1921, in Toronto, Canadian researchers Frederick Banting and Charles Best isolated insulin while working at the University of Toronto. Their experiments demonstrated that insulin allowed cells to absorb glucose from the bloodstream, preventing dangerous elevations in blood sugar. Under normal conditions, after a meal raises blood glucose levels, beta cells in the pancreas release insulin. This hormone signals muscle, liver, and fat cells to absorb glucose and either use it immediately or store it as glycogen. When blood sugar levels fall, alpha cells release glucagon, which prompts the liver to release stored glucose. This hormonal balance protects the brain from energy deprivation while preventing glucose from damaging blood vessels. Diabetes mellitus represents a breakdown of this regulatory system, revealing how finely tuned the balance must be. Breathing introduces another layer of control that operates almost entirely outside conscious awareness. In the early 20th century, physiologists studying respiratory control centers in the brainstem discovered that carbon dioxide levels, rather than oxygen alone, are the primary driver of breathing rate. As carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood, it forms carbonic acid, lowering pH. Chemoreceptors in the medulla oblongata detect this change and trigger an increase in breathing rate. Carbon dioxide is expelled and pH returns toward normal. This feedback loop operates continuously, even during sleep. Experiments conducted in the 1920s and 1930s using controlled gas mixtures demonstrated how rapidly breathing responds to chemical changes. Loss of this regulation, as seen in severe lung disease or brainstem injury, leads to rapid systemic failure, underscoring the importance of chemical balance. Circulation presents a constant mechanical challenge. Blood pressure must remain high enough to deliver oxygen and nutrients, but low enough to avoid damaging delicate vessels. Baroreceptors located in the carotid sinus and aortic arch detect pressure changes with each heartbeat. When blood pressure rises, signals sent to the brainstem reduce heart rate and dilate blood vessels. When pressure falls, heart rate increases and vessels constrict. This reflex was first characterized experimentally in the late 19th century through animal studies conducted in Germany and France. The effectiveness of this system becomes apparent when it briefly falters. Standing up too quickly can cause blood to pool in the legs, reducing blood flow to the brain. Dizziness follows. Within seconds, baroreceptor reflexes restore balance. Chronic failure of this system contributes to hypertension, a condition extensively studied throughout the 20th century as researchers linked prolonged pressure imbalance to heart disease and stroke. Water and electrolyte balance adds yet another dimension. Cells are highly sensitive to changes in water content. The kidneys regulate fluid balance under hormonal control, primarily through antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. When blood becomes concentrated, osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus trigger ADH release from the posterior pituitary gland. ADH signals the kidneys to reabsorb water, reducing urine output. When fluid levels rise, ADH secretion decreases, allowing excess water to be excreted. Electrolytes such as sodium and potassium are regulated alongside water. These ions are essential for nerve impulses, muscle contraction, and heart rhythm. Clinical observations dating back to the early 20th century demonstrated that even small electrolyte imbalances could cause confusion, weakness, or fatal arrhythmias. What feels like thirst or fatigue often reflects deeper regulatory adjustments underway. Not all homeostatic responses are harmless when prolonged. The stress response, mediated by hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, evolved to handle immediate threats. Cannon himself studied this response, describing it as the fight-or-flight reaction. In short bursts, it increases heart rate, elevates blood glucose, and redirects energy to muscles. When activated chronically, however, it disrupts immune function, blood pressure, metabolism, and sleep. Research conducted throughout the late 20th century revealed how prolonged stress shifts homeostasis from protection to pathology. Together, these systems reveal a deeper truth about life. Stability is not stillness, it is constant negotiation. The body survives not by avoiding change, but by responding to it with speed and precision. Sensors detect deviation, control centers interpret signals, effectors restore balance. This cycle repeats endlessly, silently preserving the conditions that make life possible. You rarely notice this work unless it fails. Fever, breathlessness, dizziness, fatigue, and confusion are signals that balance is slipping. Health is not the absence of fluctuation, but the ability to adapt without breaking. Homeostasis is not a single mechanism, but a symphony of corrections playing continuously beneath awareness. You are alive not because your body never changes, but because it never stops correcting itself. This is Mattermosaic, piecing together the universe, one discovery at a time. If uncovering the hidden systems that keep your body in balance made you reflect on how fragile and precise life truly is, pass this story along. Add your curiosity to the conversation, and continue with us as we trace the mechanisms that shape reality, one layer at a time.